The geology of South Florida and a warm, wet subtropical climate provide conditions well suited for a large marshland ecosystem known as the Everglades. The Everglades is a part of a series of interdependent ecosystems that include cypress swamps, mangrove forests, tropical hardwood hammocks, pine rockland, and the marine environment of Florida Bay. However, over the past 100 years, careless development and draining of this unique ecosystem has compromised its health. A massive restoration plan has been implemented that may require 40 years and approximately $10 billion to complete. Teams of biologists started at the Kissimmee River in central Florida near Orlando to follow up on the immense restoration and environmental cleanup that has helped to improve the areas. The Everglades begin at the Kissimmee River near Orlando, Florida. This river flows south to Lake Okeechobee. As water leaves Lake Okeechobee, it flows further south across a limestone shelf and empties into the Florida Bay at the southern end of the state near the Florida Keys. The Everglades began to form about 5,000 years ago when sea levels had stabilized after the last ice age. Mangrove coastlines, hardwood forests, and cypress swamps began to flourish. Water covered the lower half of the state and slowly drained into estuaries, supporting a dynamic saltwater system. As the United States was colonized and developed, industrialized settlers were drawn to the area, and the Everglades were transformed as the demand for farmland, timber, and land for development grew. Drainage canals were built, exposing millions of acres previously covered by water. Devastating hurricanes brought the demand for flood control systems, and the growing population needed a dependable supply of water. Within 50 years, over half of the Everglades were transformed dramatically. In the late 1800s, a developer by the name of Hamilton Diston had good intentions of rerouting the headwaters of the Kissimmee River. He imagined it would create thousands of acres of new fertile land that he could sell. It is now considered one of the biggest environmental mistakes ever made.
The liquid heart of this area is Lake Okeechobee, the big water. This monster had to be controlled by bigger levees and by bigger canals that would give it bigger outlets to the sea.
The original Kissimmee River had meandered over 100 miles from Lake Kissimmee to Lake Okeechobee. And when it rained, the river swelled out into a floodplain nearly 2 miles wide. During the winter or drier seasons, the river would shrink back to the smaller, slow twisting course. This cycle was critical to the many species in the area. In the 1940s, the state of Florida requested federal assistance because major hurricanes had created intense flooding. The Army Corps of Engineers responded by rechanneling the Kissimmee River. The old meandering twists and turns of the river disappeared, along with the floodplains. The most distressing result of this was that the natural filters that protected the river from phosphorus and other agricultural and urban runoff were no longer filtering the water flow. Subsequently, the newly dredged canal became a direct pipeline for contaminated water to flow into the heart of the Everglades. In the 1990s, scientists and engineers came up with a plan to backfill parts of the man-made canal and reconnect the original winding river. They hoped that the old river still had the ability to heal itself. Further phases of restoration are currently ongoing, and the results have been favorable. Since the completion of Phase 1 of restoration, scientists have discovered promising increases in dissolved oxygen levels, which is essential for aquatic life. Reductions in floating plant cover and accumulated sediments on the river bottom, recovery of wetlands, and increased populations of waterfowl, wading birds, and several fish species. By slowing down the flow, water gets stored in the floodplains, allowing for longer dwell time for cleansing and filtering out chemicals such as phosphorus. The Kissimmee River ends at Lake Okeechobee, the fourth largest lake in America, and sometimes when too much pollution is present, this immense body of water can suffer greatly. High levels of phosphorus from agriculture and lawn fertilizers can fuel explosive plant growth and algae blooms. These blooms use up large quantities of oxygen in the water as decomposers break down dead plant life. Algal blooms also block sunlight from reaching underwater plants and fish. Storm water slowly seeps into Lake Okeechobee from many sources. The pollutants settle on the lake bottom, mixing in with the sediment. When tropical storms or hurricanes pass over or near the lake, the sediment is churned up and resuspended in the water. Previously, when the lake's water levels rose, control systems were used to prevent flooding. They released water east and west, and concentrated pollutants began to flow into these areas. The new restoration project returns the overflow to its natural course, to the south. In the past, as the area south of Lake Okeechobee was drained, the land became a very productive environment for farmers because of the subtropical climate and the rich deposits of peat soil, which was created by seasonal floods over thousands of years. The peat soil is commonly referred to as muck or black gold. Farmers face many difficulties, especially biomechanical oxidation. Tiny microbes break down the carbon in the soil, releasing carbon dioxide into the environment. The soil is susceptible to burning, and being so light, it can blow away in the wind. Scientists continually check the soil quality, water quantity and quality, water distribution, bottom sediments, and phosphorus levels. The thick growth of native cattails can become a nuisance. High phosphorus caused the cattails to thrive, blocking other native plants and keeping certain waterfowl away. Scientists continue south, taking core samples containing bottom sediments. They find a noticeable white layer from the sample. Further south still, they find that the phosphorus levels have dropped and the white layer seems to have disappeared, proving that phosphorus is being filtered out along the way. This may appear like pond scum, but it's perfectly natural. This is called calcareous periphyton, communities of algae, fungus, and bacteria that grow as a thin film on rocks and plants and sometimes just float along on the surface. It's important to the Everglades because it is food for other animals, creates oxygen for the water, and filters out phosphorus. Biologists are also incorporating larger-scale projects to help cleanse the waters and reconstruct wetlands by maintaining a specially engineered mix of plants. They match plant species ideal for metabolizing or filtering out the specific level of nutrients present in the water.
In reality, for us to get somewhat back to where we were, we have to combine a mechanical process along with a natural biological process, right?
Yeah, and that's a real challenge.
Water leaving the Everglades agricultural area passes through a pump station into a series of treatment cells that are filled with vegetation that can reduce phosphorus. Nutrient-rich water first passes through emergent vegetation, such as cattails. These plants take turns further cleansing the water, dropping the phosphorus levels by about 80%. From there, clean water heads south, entering the natural wetlands of the Everglades. These treatment areas have prevented well over 2,200 metric tons of phosphorus from entering the Everglades in the past 10 years. Biologists also closely monitor tree islands in the marshes. Tree islands are small teardrop strips in the marshes that rise up above the water levels and offer the only real dry land areas for varied species of birds, mammals, and plants.
And even though you can see on this image that the green might only represent 10% of the total Everglades, it represents more than 50% of the biodiversity of the Everglades.
Seasonal fluctuations in water levels are important to many species, especially thousands of wading birds that migrate here every year.
If that nest and the surrounding habitat also gets too deep, then the parents can no longer forage because their beaks are only 6 inches or their legs are only a foot. If the water depth goes over a foot, it's too deep to feed the young and the young perish.
This is the Fakahatchee strand of the Everglades on the southwest coast of Florida.
So Mike, why do you call this the Amazon of Florida?
Well, because of all the water here in these sloughs in the Fakahatchee Strand, it tends to moderate the temperature and the humidity. And all that humidity saturates the air and elevates the dew point above freezing, so it keeps it frost-free. So it's like the tropics.
Frost-free.
Many people think the Everglades ecosystems end on land. But the reality is that the flow of water extends far out into Florida Bay, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Atlantic Ocean. Where runoff containing chemicals makes it to the ocean just off the Florida coast, scientists witnessed a system in decline. Coral polyps are negatively affected by algae, bleaching, or diseases such as red band or black band from poor water quality. There are all types of scientists involved in protecting the health of ecosystems like the Everglades. Biologists study the many life forms. Botanists determine how plant life is necessary for the environment. Chemists test chemicals in the water. And ornithologists keep a close eye on bird life. Organizations such as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, along with many others, have banded together to help protect the Everglades. Even scientists must evolve with this sensitive habitat as they learn new ways to battle the problems that come along with an increasing population, invasive species, and the influx of chemicals into the Everglades. We must be careful, treating the environment with the utmost care and concern, as the health of these delicate ecosystems also affects our health.